November reading wrap-up time! Starting with my 2-star reviews. Barbarian Lover by Ruby Dixon. All these Ice Planet Barbarian books are gonna be rereads for me, and I have so far lowered most of the scores. This is the 3rd book in the series, and it is Kira and Aesko's relationship, which does not work at all. I read Kira's character like a conservative, modest, Christian kind of woman because a lot of her behavior doesn't make sense without religion, but Ruby Dixon kind of shoves this modesty character in our face without the Christian faith or any other faith that would lead to this kind of modesty, which really makes her internal debate about like being modest, saving herself for marriage, all that kind of stuff, like not make any sense anymore because the reason people do that is religion. So like the payoff of Kira learning to care only about what she thinks, loving herself, and being more free with her body and free with her emotion like doesn't resonate well because the conflict isn't just between herself and her personal modesty. It should be between herself and whatever it is her religion commanded her to do, but because we don't do the religious part, it's sort of like, what is even going on right now? So besides Kira's character being kind of confusing, I also find her love interest Aesko to be a little bit inept. I like that he's interested in pursuing a long-term relationship with her even without resonance. Most hones in on her always being sad and refers to her permanently as sad eyes, kind of implies he thinks being sad is sexy, and that is so not okay with me. I sort of get where Ruby Dixon was going. I think she wanted a relationship without resonance. Spoilers here, but she destroys that at the end because the two of them resonate for each other. So she takes a story about choosing your relationship, finding love in spite of the fact you'll never be able to do this one specific task, and kind of like undercuts it. And I think in a world today where there are so many women who cannot have kids or who choose not to have kids, like Kira's story is deep and meaningful, and then her happily ever after includes erasing her hardship, or maybe even like learning to value the fact that she'll always be kid-free. Like her and Aesko sort of go a little bit into that conversation, like, hey, the fact that you can't have kids means these things for our life, and that's kind of sweet. And then at the end she resonates, so they are gonna have kids. I don't know, the Kui fixed whatever made her infertile. It really doesn't work on so many fronts and is a little bit like offensive and definitely actively off-putting. Rolling me into my 3-star reviews. Give Me Back My Children by Sarah Allred. I started this one back in October and it's when I managed to finish here in November. I made it a priority to get it done. I found this one really frustrating because she uses a literary technique of talking about like the demon said this to me and the demon said that to me, and it took me a long time to get used to this being like her brain sort of pushing and pulling her in contradictory ways. I really feel because none of these books go too far into the religion part of the cult, I don't like 100% understand what she means by demons. I do find that I really enjoy Sarah as a character. I really appreciate that she tells it here. I didn't necessarily appreciate that everybody here has a pseudonym, and I spent a long time looking up to see what pseudonym was attached to what person, when, and if I could do that. Super frustrating for no reason. Like a lot of these people are public figures. I don't know why Sarah chose to do this. I guess she really only wanted to tell her story or what she felt she had personal rights to, and she didn't want to step on anyone else's feet, which I guess in theory is a nice thing, but for me as like a reader, researcher, note taker kind of person who was like trying to create these family trees and see how these connections and intersections crossed over and worked together, it was really difficult. You know, I don't know who her ghostwriter was or what kind of advice they recommended her to like help her get this book published, but I do feel like they probably should have intervened and given something that was a little bit more relatable besides the demon on my shoulder kind of thing. Maybe they should have pushed a little bit more to actually name names, because at the point that Give Me Back My Children comes out, I believe Rachel Jeff's Breaking Free is already out, and she be naming the names. So like minimally, where their stories aligned, they could have used either the same pseudonyms or they could have used the same real names. Obscuring all the names of all the Jeffs who are actually executing Warren Jeff's orders, who have actually been convicted and are in jail. Very frustrating to me, and made me have to like go back into Rachel Jeff's book too and look up a bunch of news articles, and all of that like took me away away from Sarah's experience, Sarah's journey, and what Sarah was or wasn't there for, and like her thoughts and opinions, which is part of why you come to these kinds of like fundamentalist Mormon memoirs, because they have been through something like so unique and tragic and intriguing, and you want to see like the thinking process that went on there, the how and the why, the what like was the last straw moment. And like Sarah is interacting in a very unique way here that I haven't seen in a lot of these other kinds of stories, and I would have really liked to hone in on that instead of like constantly being distracted by all the fake names and stuff. Next is Favorite Wife by Susan Ray LeBaron Schmitt. This was a reread for me, but it's been quite some time since I originally read it, and I just wanted like another peek into like the LeBaron saga and all the murders and mayhem that happened over there. The reason I think it's down here at 3 instead of 4 stars is just that Susan is a boomer and she's telling it in a boomer kind of way. And what I mean by that is she's like justifying attitudes, feelings, stuff like that she had at the time in a way that to me reads like she still kind of sort of feels that way about some of that stuff, or like in a way that sort of implies like we can't judge her for those actions or for those things because this is the prevailing attitude of the time, and it just doesn't work that way. A lot of boomers I've noticed when they're writing like back in their child age times, they take on a child voice, they take on a lot of like justification, there's very simplistic language, and part of me like kind of enjoys that, but part of me finds it really frustrating because like specifically in Susan's situation, it is making light of a lot of horrific things or like normalizing in a way that's really odd to me, because Susan becomes a plural wife, aka getting married to a man who's like 45, 50 when she is 14, 15 years old. And I looked it up, even in 1968 when this happened, women under the age of 16 getting married at that time period was less than 10%. And especially not someone who's 14, 15 getting married to a man in plural marriage, like even more unusual. Somewhat get that she just wanted to show how common this was, how accepted it was, how everyone's like kind of pushing her towards it. But the like normalization of it to this degree where I had to go look it up and re-verify that I wasn't crazy and that this is a very odd scenario was strange to me, especially because she does interact with local authorities and the real world, so I feel like she must know how other people perceive this. That she never really handles that side of it is difficult for me. Additionally, when she's talking about various family members of her leaving the faith or falling into like the Herbalite camp or whatever, I just feel like we didn't get enough there either. I would have really loved for her to talk to her mom and like see if she was having doubts and that's why she was spending so much time with her grandma in Utah, or if she was there purely because her grandma was sick. I would have loved to know more about Susan's father, who like originally was so sincere in his beliefs and became disillusioned and like actually took his second wife and went someplace else. Is that because he loved the second wife more? Is it because the mom had found another way to peace out? Was he realizing that because he had these 2 wives and he created a family structure like this, he was kind of trapped? I just felt like even if she hadn't had these conversations with her parents, she didn't know exactly what they were thinking or feeling, she could have picked this apart a little bit more, broke it down a little bit better. And because everything is just like so cheerful, so keep sweet, so normalized to the whole thing, it sort of brings it closer to a 3 star on a reread than I did at the 4 or 5 I think I originally gave it. Rolling me into the original Ice Planet Barbarians by Ruby Dixon. I think this is probably a little bit closer to a 2 star than a 3 star for me. I put it in the 3 star because it's pretty much like the gold standard of alien romances. The abduction, the dark horror elements to it, the things that are supposed to be romantic being actually creepy and chilling at points. This is all pretty standard format in alien romance. So even though I have conflicting feelings about it, is the genre. And then on top of that, this is the first book in the series, and really to get us through some of the horrors of these revelations, what was intended for these girls, what the new reality is for them now, you need a character like Georgie and Vectel to get it done. So even though I hate Georgie and Vectel and have no idea why they're the leaders of these groups of people past this first book, I think they make terrible decisions, they're awful leaders, they're a little too fucking self-absorbed for me to stand even as side characters. Also like so easy breezy in this book, almost unfathomably so. All of that is very necessary though in this first book to make things happen. Even though I don't like it, even though it couldn't be for me, I guess I'm happy that they're happy. And I'm kind of happy they're built this way, because if they weren't, girls would have all frozen to death on that spaceship. Also, to be entirely fair to this first book, there are a couple of things going on that you don't understand in book 1 as well as perhaps you should. As you continue into the series, it becomes more obvious. Vectel isn't just horny all the time for no good reason, that's the cooey. And like the horror power of the Kui, the lack of ability to control your own body. We get to see that firsthand, especially in some of the women when they start resonating. An interesting exploration in and of itself, and it retroactively rewrites the idea that Vectel as like a big strong He-Man barbarian cannot and does not need to control himself, and like he wants a pat on the back for it. And Morning says like, oh no, he was actually struggling with a lot. But of course, unfortunately, in this first book, you just don't know that information. And because of that, it does come off as like very patriarchal, sexist, wanting a pat on the back for doing the bare minimum. Rolling me into 4-star reviews. Barbarian Alien by Ruby Dixon. And this is the second book in the Ice Planet Barbarian series. It's going to be Liz and Raouche's book. Of the original book ratings, I think this is the only one that went up a star instead of down a star in the reread. And for me, it's because I love Liz and Raouche's relationship, their place in this story moving forward. They're by far my favorite secondary characters. I think too, because it's a reread and I understand a lot of the components and the setup and how things go moving forward, I am more open to like this Kui story, this like secretly hiding Liz away moment. I am better able to accept how like feisty and conflicted Liz is here, where before I think I felt like Raouche was being gross. And if you still read it that way, it's fine, I get it. But on this reread, I could see where there were some mixed signals going on between him and Liz. I could see the cultural clash a little bit better. Like, these aliens are used to knowing that their ultimate relationship is not decided by them, it's decided by the Kui. And when people have fought against these pairings, like severe tragedies have gone down. So from Raouche's perspective, it makes sense to isolate Liz until things are a little bit more solidified, because if she does fight this resonance situation, it could lead to tragedy for both of them. And of course, from Liz's perspective, she is not an arranged marriage girly. She grew up in like a standard US kind of culture. And beyond that, she's a very independent, self-reliant woman, and she feels like she could probably do okay for herself in this environment because she does know how to hunt. She has learned all of these like different farming techniques and stuff like that from living on a farm. She's a very confident, outspoken kind of character, and all of that is kind of like working against her accepting that now something as serious as like your life partner is chosen for you by a symbiote you had to take on that you didn't really want. Next is going to be The Everlasting by Alix E. Harrow. This one I read for the Weirdo Book Club, and I was incredibly excited to read it. I would have picked it up anyways because I'm a huge fan of Alix E. Harrow, and what got me into reading her was The Six Deaths of the Saint. It uses a ton of like that high fantasy, traditional medieval set dressing that we know all those pieces, expect certain things from them, and then it kind of like twists and morphs it into this really unique and interesting take. This book is sort of kind of inspired by / loosely based off of. Alix E. Harrow is a stunning author generally. I read The Butcher and Blackbird either last year or earlier this year, and I'll link the video with a review to that over here. I really want to read her backlist. Like, I just think that she's an amazing writer. I deeply appreciate the way she interweaves relationships across different genders and across different time periods, like giving visibility in different time periods to that kind of relationship. I don't know, I find it deeply moving just on its own, especially the way it's just like accepted and stated. Because these are fantasy books, I don't necessarily care whether or not that's historically accurate. I enjoy its presence there. I felt for all the characters here in The Everlasting. I liked the premise. I was prepared for this to be sort of like a time travel butterfly effect style story. I can't get into too much detail about it without massive spoilers, so I will not talk about it too deeply. I do think Alix E. Harrow has this mastery over the classical fantasy set pieces, what they are, what their function is in a story, and she establishes them and then moves them in ways that are against the rules of chess, but in a way that I just love. Like, you can sort of see why she twisted them that way, and it makes you think about it in a different way. So I enjoy all of that. And you might be wondering why this is a 4-star read instead of a 5-star read for me, and the answer is really simple. First of all, I'm not a big fan of time travel butterfly effect things. This one is doing it really well, but it's still using a gimmick that's not for me, so it has to overcome a lot to hit a 5-star rating. Personally, there are parts of this where this goes too long. The pacing pacing is not quite right. I think these slower and faster elements of pacing aren't intentional. It's part of like the time looping in on itself kind of thing, and like the realizing everything, blah, 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 that's going on there that I don't want to spoil. It doesn't change though my overall enjoyment, even if that's intentionally done and part of the narrative. It doesn't feel sloppy, but it's not enjoyable, and that sort of diminishes it from being that perfect 5-star aspirational rating. Which, speaking of which, it's time for that 5-star review. The Unworthy by Agustina Bazterria. Sorry for mispronouncing that name. I'm never gonna get good at it, no matter how much I try. Now, you guys have already heard a review on this that I gave back in May when I read it for the first time. This is a reread that I did with my Nevermore Notes book club, and I'm so glad we did it here in November because it's short, because it was a reread. It made it really easy for me in a time that's very hectic and busy, and I really wanted to reread it. There's such lush, beautiful prose, and there's so much packed into this, and also what's going on is like really tragic and sad and heart-wrenching. So there were things where like I was so focused over here or so focused over there that I didn't catch everything on the first read, and then were still things in there that like surprised me when I reread it, like, oh, I totally missed this the first time round. Also, there are a couple of moments during this narrator's reveal of her past that were completely surprising the first read. Going in with the foreknowledge that I had knowing about those things, it was interesting to get a second take where like the reveal and the surprise of it wasn't so overwhelming to me, and I could just focus on what she was telling me and what that meant. I do think that this author has a way of really focusing in on the horror and like some of the terrible, worst, ugliest elements of humanity, making you feel that in an extreme kind of bodily way, but not taking you into it past a point where I feel like it's exploitative. Tender is the Flesh is all about the meat company turning to humans and using them as a new source of meat, and it has a lot of grotesque cannibalism, disgusting kind of imagery in it, and I think it takes that as far as it can go. But I think it's also honest about what that would look like and why it would go that way. And here in The Unworthy, there's a lot of assault and like exploitation of people's ignorance, as well as like their desire for faith and safety and something better. And to me, that's a story you could write that would feel very exploitative, shock value, heavy description into things that are there just to titillate or shock or disgust. Bazterria covers it in a way that is heart-wrenching, intense, deeply emotional and personal, without being there shocking just for shock purpose or like titillating a reader in a way that, I don't know, leaves a very bad taste in my mouth when we're talking about things that involve assault. All of which is gonna roll me into my December TBR. My Nevermore Notes book club is going to be reading Wuthering Heights, and I've got the book right here. I think it's so perfect that we're going to be reading this one this month because in February a new adaptation's coming out of it. So if you wanted to catch yourself up with the classic media, we're doing it this month, and I've got a link to the Nevermore Notes book club down below. So I purchased this hardcover because I'm going to be listening and reading to it at the same time, and I'm definitely also going to be taking notes while I'm going along because my understanding is that this is kind of a complex book that's a little bit tricky to understand, so I want to give myself the best chance of it I can. I am pretty sure that I'll be doing an annotate with me style video to go along with it. It would be cool just to talk about what I'm doing right now, what my process is, because I know a fellow booktuber, This Story Ain't Over, is setting up to do a year-long readathon called the Anti-Brain Rot Reading Challenge, and in it she's challenging people to annotate stories. So if you were looking to take notes and wanted like some inspiration for that, or wanted a place to start, then this might be a good kind of video setup for that. And on top of that, I know the personal curriculum trend is big right now, and if you are personally learning and looking for more inspiration, how you can get more out of those moments, then maybe how I annotate, even if it's not right for you, can give you ideas for your own personal note. There's no wrong way to annotate books, right? But someone saying you can do it any way you want isn't really helpful if you're not sure where to start. I'm also reading Krampus the Yule Lord by Brom from the Weirdo Book Club, and I'm stoked for this because Slewfoot has been on the TBR for the longest longest, and for whatever reasons I never quite get around to reading it. So getting a little holiday read with the Weirdo Book Club is the perfect way to do this for me because I'll be motivated to pick it up and finish. And also, I love Krampus. It is my favorite way to do a Christmas themed story. Some things I have to read to keep on schedule for videos I'm planning to release next year. I want to pick up the next 4 in the Ice Planet Barbarian series and finish it this December. Originally, I wanted to release this Ice Planet Barbarian video for Valentine's Day, but I have a 10-day trip that's going on between now and then that's totally messed up my filming, note-taking schedule. So I am pushing this video off a little bit. I'll be reading the next 4 this month, and then the month after that another 4, and maybe it will come out in late February, early March. I am enjoying my rereads, especially because I'm reading them with my sister, so it's no great hardship. And because I'm not going to be finishing Ice Planet Barbarian video in time for Valentine's Day, I do plan to finish reading the Scared Sexy Amazon Originals anthology and release that video instead. I always intended to get around to finishing this Amazon Original series, and I wasn't quite sure if it was going to go Valentine's Day or October, but since it's a pretty new release, I think maybe the second wind for it could be in February. And also the Amazon Original stories where I individually review each one of those kind of write themselves as I'm reading the books, so I think it'll be much easier for me to complete that than it would be this Ice Planet Barbarian challenge where I'm taking a lot of notes and notations, and hopefully I think I want to be creating some graphs and charts and stuff, rolling me into my ongoing reads. So I want to almost completely clear out my Kindle Unlimited before January starts. Right now I have 18 titles sitting on there, and I want to bring it down to 5. That said, there are a couple I know are not coming off the Kindle Unlimited. That's going to include One Dark Window, which I am still using to write a script, and its follow-up to Twisted Crowns, which I have not finished reading and originally said I wanted to finish by the end of the year, but I've got to tell you, I've got so much I need to finish reading. I know I can't take this one off the Kindle Unlimited even if I finish it up, and I'm just not feeling super compelled to go back there and figure out what's going on, so I think I'm probably going to wait for January to finish this one. But I do want to finish reading Spirit Seers and Seances. I'm about 31% of the way through. This one's about Victorian era spiritualism, and having all this extra information about spiritualism, seances, Ouija boards, automatic writing, all that kind of stuff has been really helpful to me because I read a lot of books about spiritualism. In particular, right now I'm listening to The Bewitching, which is also on this TBR to finish. This Seers and Seances book has really given me a little extra insight into what's going on in The Bewitching, so I want to finish it this year and then be able to pull it off the Kindle Unlimited and move on. I also have a ton of horror I need to get through. I'm gonna start with the shortest books and move into the longer ones. For this month specifically, I intend to finish Cursed Bunny, which I started in October and didn't finish, but I'm like halfway done, so that should be doable. Next is We All Rot Eventually by Mia Ballard, which I will either read this month or remove. And then finally Annie Bot by Sierra Greer, which I don't know if this is just science fiction or horror. I think it's got a little bit of horror within the science fiction. It's only like 224 pages. I'm really interested by it, so I do want to read and finish that one too. Those are the ones I am for sure keeping / committing to, and then I'll let you know what I call whether or not I read it in my next month wrap up. As I said, the last thing I'm in process reading is The Bewitching by Silvia Moreo Garcia, and come hell or high water, I want to finish that one too. I am really enjoying it, like slow little pits and pats here at a time. The long pauses I'm taking in between listening to it on audio is actually like a little bit impeding me from fully reading it and getting into, so I think just like sitting down and plowing through it in December is the way to go. I'd like to push through a couple other things I have on Kindle Unlimited. I'm not going to commit to necessarily reading everything that's there even if I'm pulling it off, although I'll tell you about it, because I think I already have 15 titles on the docket as it stands, and 15 books is a lot of books to finish your year off with. I think it's manageable for me, but I want to make sure I'm leaving enough time for like all of the projects that I'm doing with these books, and so that the ones I want to take notes on, I really can, instead of just sort of like listening and then knowing that eventually I'll have to circle back to them. That's going to be everything I read this past November, along with my plans for December. But talk to me in those comments down below. What are you reading this holiday season? And do you have extra time because of your time off, or less time because you have so many things planned? And as always, keep reading.